The linoleum was cold even through the soles of her shoes. Arya Voss noticed things like that. The particular cold of a hospital floor at 6 in the morning, the way it traveled up through rubber and cotton and settled at the back of the knee. She had been on this ward for 11 hours already, and she had 3 more to go, and she noticed the cold, the way she noticed everything, quietly and without complaint. Nobody in that corridor was paying attention to the floor. They were paying attention to the dog. He stood at the end of the hall, outside room 14, absolutely still. His ears were forward. His golden eyes were fixed on the door. He had not moved in 4 minutes, and every person who passed had slowed without meaning to, because something about him commanded it. He was a Belgian Malinois, lean and alert, with a short fawn coat that caught the overhead fluorescence like hammered bronze. He was not barking. He was not pacing. He was simply present, in a way that made the corridor feel smaller. "What is he doing?" a nursing aide whispered. "He's been there since she brought him in," someone said. "He's never been in this building. He's never even been on this floor." A resident physician stopped mid-stride and stared. A charge nurse pressed her clipboard to her chest. A man visiting his elderly mother paused in an open doorway and did not go in. Nobody had an explanation. What nobody there knew was that the dog had done something like this once before, a long time ago, in a place none of them had ever been, for a woman standing in a hallway not unlike this one, and that the woman at the other end of his gaze was the same woman, older now, in blue scrubs, with her dark hair pinned back, standing with her hand on the door of room 14, as though she already knew. Her name was Arya Voss, and nobody in that building had thought to ask about her. We tell stories here about the people who show up without being seen, the ones who carry more than their title says, more than their badge says, more than their quiet will ever say. If that kind of story matters to you, we'd be glad to have you stay. And we'd love to know, has there ever been someone in your life who was more than anyone around them understood? Tell us in the comments. We read every one. 3 weeks earlier, the Caldwell Veterans Transitional Care Unit had been a hospital ward like any other. Overhead lights, the smell of antiseptic, and something vaguely floral from a diffuser someone had plugged in near the nurses' station. A row of 8 rooms, a shared common area with 4 chairs, and a television nobody watched, and a whiteboard where the charge nurse wrote the name of the day's staff lead in green marker every morning. For 6 weeks running, that name had been Arya Voss. She was 34 years old, dark hair, almost black, worn in a low bun that stayed tight through 12-hour shifts, eyes the pale gray of winter sky, the kind that looked calm, even when they were working hard. She wore blue scrubs, always the same shade, with a small silver pin on the lapel, a pair of wings, so worn the detail had gone soft, and she moved through the ward the way water moves through rock, without hurry, without waste, always finding the path. She was the first to arrive. She was the last to leave. On the mornings after overnight shifts, she sometimes stayed an extra hour because a patient had asked a question she hadn't finished answering, and she could not make herself go until the answer was whole. She never asked for recognition. She never pointed at her own work. She never stood at the nursing station talking about herself when a room needed her. "You have a patient in 7 who hasn't eaten since yesterday," she told the oncoming nurse one morning, quiet and direct. "He thinks the food tastes like cardboard. I told him I'd look into it. I already looked into it. There's a note in the chart." "Arya," said Denise Holt, the day nurse, pausing with her hand on the handoff sheet, "you're supposed to be clocking out." "I am," Arya said, and she was already halfway down the hall. Denise watched her go. She had worked alongside Arya for 2 years. She had stopped being surprised by her and started being quietly, persistently amazed. The patients on Caldwell liked her in the particular way that people like someone who does not make them feel small. She remembered their service branches without checking their charts. She remembered which one's wife was named Marlene, and which one's son had just started college, and which one had a daughter who called every Sunday at 4 o'clock, and how that call made him look afterward. Not better, exactly, not worse, just full. She remembered these things, and she did not perform remembering them. She simply asked. She simply knew. The silver wings pin had been on her lapel since the first day Denise had known her. Once, early on, Denise had asked about it. Arya had looked down at it for a moment. "Old habit," she said. That was all she said. Denise had not asked again, but she thought about it sometimes, in the way you think about a door that has always been slightly ajar. The dog came in on a Tuesday. His name was Brago. That was what the paperwork said, anyway, and the paperwork had come with him in a manila folder that the program coordinator had carried under one arm like a library book. Brago was a Belgian Malinois, 6 years old, retired from service, medically cleared, trained in therapeutic visitation. He was assigned to the Caldwell unit through a Veterans Outreach partnership. His handler for the sessions would be Arya Voss, listed in the agreement because she was the unit lead and because she had completed the required orientation in less than a week, which was faster than anyone expected. Nobody made much of that. Brago arrived on a Tuesday morning. He walked through the unit's front entrance with his head level and his ears calm, and he looked at Arya the moment she came around the corner of the nurses' station, and something happened in the room that nobody quite knew how to name. He did not pull toward her. He did not wag. He simply looked at her the way a compass finds north, directly, without hesitation, as if everything that had come before was just the approach. Arya knelt. She put her hand flat on the floor in front of him, not toward him, just available. He walked to her hand and pressed his nose against her palm. Denise was watching from the medication room doorway. Said Denise. She had been watching animals greet people for her entire life. She had seen dogs who liked everyone, dogs who liked no one, and dogs who chose one person in a room, the same way a person chooses a word, precisely. Brago was the third kind, and the person he had chosen was standing at the nurses' station with her palm open, not reaching, just waiting. "He likes you," Denise said. Arya looked up. She was not smiling exactly. Something in her face was still and a little far away, and then it came back, and she patted Brago's neck once and stood. "He's easy to like," she said. Denise watched the dog watch Arya walk back to the nursing station. His ears tracked her like antennae. His eyes did not leave her. Denise wrote nothing in her notes about it, but she did not forget it either. The man who made things difficult was named Dr. Raymond Coyle. He was the ward's supervising physician, a compact man of 52, with silver hair and the specific, confident energy of someone who had been told he was excellent so many times that he had stopped questioning it. He was not unkind. That was the precise thing about him. He was never unkind. He simply had a way of arranging his face when he was unimpressed that was worse than unkindness, because it left no room for argument. He arrived on the Caldwell unit every morning at 7:45, reviewed the charts, made his rounds, and left by noon. He had opinions about protocol. He had opinions about staffing. He had, since the third week of Arya's assignment as unit lead, a specific and quietly stated opinion about therapeutic animal programs. Liability, he said, the first time the partnership came up in a staff meeting. Every time someone decides an animal is therapy, we end up managing 2 patients. He had laughed a little. Others had laughed a little too. Arya had not laughed. She had written something in her notepad. He noticed. "Nurse Voss," he said, as the meeting was closing, "I understand you've taken on the handler role for the dog program." "Yes," she said. "It's not in your primary description." "No," she said, "but I completed the certification." He looked at her the way he looked at memos he had not read and did not plan to. "We'll see how it goes," he said. 2 weeks later, he reassigned her morning rounds to a junior nurse and moved her primary duties to administrative documentation, chart audits, supply orders, the paperwork that nobody wanted. He framed it as a workflow adjustment. He mentioned efficiency. He mentioned the value of a unit lead who could maintain oversight from a central position. Denise was furious. "He just benched you," she said, in the break room, low and fast. "He adjusted the workflow," Arya said. "He benched you because you didn't laugh at his joke." Arya poured a cup of coffee and set it in front of Denise, then poured one for herself. "The chart audits need doing," she said. Nobody was doing them well. "Arya, the patients are still being seen. The rooms are still covered. I'm still here." She picked up her coffee. "Brago still gets his sessions." Denise stared at her. "You're not even angry." Arya considered that for a moment. "Not the useful kind," she said. She sat down and opened a chart, and Denise sat across from her and watched her work, and the break room was quiet and warm and full of the smell of bad coffee, and Arya did not say another word about Dr. Coyle. What she did instead was her job, all of it. Every audit complete by end of shift, every order checked, every patient whose room she could no longer visit, officially visited informally, on her way past, with a word through a doorway or a hand on a shoulder in the hall. She brought Brago into the unit every session day with the same care she brought to everything, quietly, completely, without announcement. But Dr. Coyle had begun watching. It was the middle of October when Dr. Coyle decided to make his point. He did it the way careful men do, with a meeting and a reason that sounded reasonable. He called it a program review. He scheduled it for a Thursday afternoon, and he sent the unit's program coordinator a polite email asking for a formal demonstration of the therapeutic animal partnership before he submitted his recommendation to the hospital's administration board. The coordinator was a woman named Sandra Elliott, who had been running veterans outreach programs for 16 years and who had the particular weariness of someone who had survived many program reviews and did not intend to stop surviving them. She read the email twice, called Arya, and said 3 words. "He's testing you." "I know," Arya said. In front of the board liaison. "I know." Arya. "I know, Sandra." There was a pause on the line. "Brago okay?" Sandra asked. "Brago is excellent," Arya said. The review was scheduled for 2 o'clock. By 1:30, the Caldwell Common Room had been quietly transformed. Extra chairs had been arranged along the interior window, the long glass panel that separated the common area from the main corridor. Dr. Coyle stood on the corridor side with the board liaison, a man named Warren Fitch, and the hospital's chief nursing officer. The unit staff stood in doorways. A few family members of patients, present for afternoon visits, had paused and stayed without quite deciding to. Arya was on the common room side, with Brago. The glass between them made it a stage. She had not arranged the chairs. She had not arranged the observers. She had brought Brago in at his usual time, taken the usual route, settled in the usual way, and the room had simply organized itself around the fact of them. Brago sat beside her. He was calm. His coat caught the afternoon light from the tall windows on the west wall, late October light, orange and long, falling in a wide diagonal across the floor. His eyes were forward. His breathing was steady. Arya did not look at the glass. She did not look at Coyle. She opened the door to the first room and said, very quietly, "Mr. Beaumont, ready when you are." The old man in the bed, 78 years old, 2 weeks post-surgery, had not spoken more than 12 words to any staff member in 8 days, turned his head toward the doorway. He looked at Brago. Brago walked in. The room was still. The late light came through the window at a low angle and lay across the foot of the bed in a bar of copper. Brago stepped into it and stopped. His ears went forward. He looked at the man in the bed, and he was entirely quiet and entirely present, and the man in the bed looked back at him, and something moved in the old man's face that none of the staff had seen before. "Hey," Mr. Beaumont said. His voice was rough. It cracked on the one syllable. Brago walked to the side of the bed and sat. The old man's hand came down from the blanket, very slowly, and rested on top of Brago's head. He did not speak again. He did not need to. Arya stood in the doorway. She was watching Brago. Her hands were at her sides, loose, and her face was quiet in the particular way it was always quiet, not empty, just still. Through the glass, on the corridor side, nobody moved. Dr. Coyle crossed his arms. He had the look of a man preparing to be unimpressed. But the board liaison, Warren Fitch, had taken a single step forward, and his hand had come up slightly from his side, not quite reaching toward the glass, and then stopped. The room let out a breath. Then Brago did something unexpected. He did not stand. He did not bark. He simply turned his head, very deliberately, from Mr. Beaumont toward the doorway, toward Arya, and he held her face in his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he turned back to the old man. It was nothing. It was a dog looking at his handler. But Warren Fitch made a sound, very small. The kind of sound that is not quite a word. He stepped up to the glass. He was watching Arya now. His face had changed. He said quietly, to no one in particular, "Where did she serve?" Dr. Coyle heard it. He turned. "Pardon?" Warren Fitch did not look at him. He was still watching Arya through the glass. "That stance," Fitch said, "the way she's holding herself at the threshold, that's not nursing school." He paused. "That's a handler, a trained one." Dr. Coyle's arms loosened slightly. "She completed a certification program." "No." Fitch's voice was quiet, certain, not that kind of trained. He watched her move to the next room. Brago followed, unhurried, at her left side, matching her pace without being told. "That heel," Fitch said. "No civilian program teaches that heel." The corridor was completely still. The chief nursing officer had her pen halfway to her clipboard and had not written anything. Denise, in the doorway of the medication room, was watching Fitch's face. Fitch turned and looked at her. She was the nearest staff member. "How long has she been here?" 2 years, Denise said. "Before that?" Denise opened her mouth, closed it. "She came from a placement agency. We didn't—" She stopped. "She never said." Fitch nodded slowly. He looked back through the glass. Arya had moved into room 12. Brago was sitting beside the bed of a woman who had not made eye contact with visitors in 3 days. The woman was looking directly at Brago. Her lips were moving. She might have been talking to him. She might have been praying. There was no way to tell from the corridor, and it did not matter. "What's her name?" Fitch asked. "Arya Voss," Denise said. Fitch went still. The word still is not quite right. He went solid, like something that had been moving steadily, had found the thing it was moving toward, and stopped because it had arrived. "Voss," he said. "Yes." He exhaled, very slowly. "Specialist Arya Voss," he said, not a question. The corridor was silent. Dr. Coyle said, very carefully, "You know her?" "I know her record," Fitch said, "or I knew it." He pressed 2 fingers to his mouth for a moment, thinking. Military working dog program. 6 years. She handled 3 dogs through active deployment. He paused. The last one was a Malinois. Nobody said anything. She received a commendation she didn't accept, Fitch continued. Refused it on the grounds that the work was the dog's. He shook his head, a slow motion. That became a whole thing internally. There were memos. Denise had gone very quiet. "Why didn't she say?" she asked. Fitch looked at her. "Would she?" he said. Denise thought about that. She thought about 2 years of side-by-side shifts, and 1 question about a silver pin, and 2 words. Old habit. "No," Denise said. "She wouldn't." They watched Arya cross from room 12 to the common area, Brago at her heel, and take a seat in the nearest chair. She was not performing anything. She was simply present, available, the way a door is available, not pushing, not pulling, just open. A man from room 9 shuffled into the common area and sat 3 chairs away and looked at Brago and said nothing. Brago did not move toward him. He stayed with Arya. He stayed until the man in the 3 chairs away chair leaned forward slightly, arms on knees, and said to the middle distance, "I had a dog once." Brago's ears moved. German Shepherd, the man said. Her name was Cleo. Arya said, very gently, tell me about Cleo. Fitch turned away from the glass. His jaw was set. He took one slow breath. She built this, he said. This whole thing, in 8 weeks, without asking for credit. Dr. Coyle said nothing. The chief nursing officer looked at him. He looked at the floor. It was Denise who found Arya in the supply room afterward, counting gauze rolls with the same focus she brought to everything. There's someone who wants to talk to you, Denise said. I heard, Arya said. She counted one more roll, set it down. She walked out of the supply room and into the corridor, and when she saw Warren Fitch standing near the nurses' station, she did not stop walking, just slowed, and Fitch met her halfway. He was 60, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, with the careful posture of a man who had spent years in meetings where posture mattered. He looked at her without the careful blankness that most authority wore. He looked at her the way Brago had looked at her when he first arrived, directly, as if the path was already known. Specialist Voss, he said. It's just Arya, she said. You served 6 years. Yes. 3 dogs. She waited. The last one, he said. A small pause. His name was Colt, she said. He retired to a family in Tempe. He's 11 now. They send pictures. Fitch nodded. Something moved across his face and then settled. The commendation, he said. It was his work, she said simply. Fitch exhaled. He looked at Brago, who was sitting 3 feet away at Arya's left side, watching them both with enormous patience. You built this program in 8 weeks, Fitch said, with no staff increase, no budget increase. You wrote the assessment protocol, certified yourself, sourced the partnership, and ran it alongside a full administrative reassignment. Arya said nothing. Why didn't you tell anyone? Denise had appeared at the hallway edge, unable to stay away. Arya looked at her for a moment. Then she said, the patients needed the program. The program needed to work. Whether they knew about me or not, didn't change either of those things. Fitch looked at Denise. Denise looked at the floor. 3 things, Fitch said, turning back to Arya. 3 things I want to tell you. He held up one finger. In my 6 years of running this liaison board, I have recommended exactly 2 programs for expanded funding. This will be the 3rd. He held up a second finger. You'll have a full-time handler budget by the 1st of the month. He paused. He held up the 3rd finger, but did not speak immediately. The hallway was very quiet. Then, the commendation you refused. There is a notation in your file that it remains open. He met her eyes. It can still be received. Arya was still for a long moment. That was Colt's, she said. You guided Colt, Fitch said. Every day, for 3 years, in conditions I would not wish on anyone. You kept him calm. You kept him whole. You brought him home. He let that sit. Some of that belongs to you. Arya looked down at Brago. Brago looked up at her. She put her hand on the top of his head, lightly. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She breathed. I'll think about it, she said. It was the most she had ever claimed for herself in Denise's hearing, and Denise had to look away because her eyes had done something embarrassing, and she was a professional. Dr. Coyle appeared at the edge of the hallway. He had been there long enough that it was clear he had heard most of it. He looked at Arya and opened his mouth and closed it and looked at the floor. The documentation, he said finally. The chart audits. They were done well. It was the smallest apology in the world. It was also the largest one he was capable of. Arya looked at him. Thank you, she said. She meant it. That was the thing. She actually meant it. And Coyle knew it. And it was harder to receive than any criticism he had given. He nodded once and walked away. The standing applause that followed came from the 3 patients in the common area who had watched through the open doorway, and from Denise, who had given up entirely on being professional, and from Sandra Elliott, who had appeared from somewhere near the exit, and who was clapping with the steady, sincere rhythm of a person who had been waiting a long time. It was not loud. It was entirely real. By November, the Caldwell unit had a standing schedule. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 o'clock, Brago came in through the side entrance, walked with Arya through the corridor, and visited each room in the same unhurried order. The patients began to expect it. Some of them dressed for it in a quiet way, a clean shirt, hair combed, the small dignities that said something was worth preparing for. The common area was always fuller on those afternoons than on any other. Word had moved through the unit, the way word moves through a closed community, without announcement, and with complete certainty. A girl of about 7 visited her grandfather one Thursday afternoon. She sat in the common area and watched Brago work the room, and then she tugged at the sleeve of her grandmother, who was 71, and had the white hair of someone who had earned every strand. "Why does the dog go to all of them?" the girl asked. "Does he know them?" Her grandmother looked at Brago. She looked at Arya, standing patient in the doorway of room 9. "He knows her," the grandmother said, "and she knows them." "So he does too." The girl considered that. "How does she know them?" "She pays attention," the grandmother said. "That's all it is. You just pay attention, for long enough, and you understand." The girl looked at Arya again. Arya was listening to the man in room 9 say something about a German shepherd named Cleo, and she was looking at him the way you look at something worth seeing. "I want to do that," the girl said. "Then you will," said her grandmother. On the wall outside the common area, in early December, the unit posted a small framed print. Sandra Elliott had commissioned it. It showed a corridor in cool, clean light, and a figure and a dog at the far end, and at the bottom, in plain type, a single line. The line read, "Attention is the first form of care." Nobody signed it. Nobody needed to. On the first Thursday in December, Brago walked through the side entrance at his usual time. He paused in the corridor outside room 14, as he sometimes did, facing the door with his ears forward and his golden eyes calm. The late light fell through the tall window on the left wall and lay across him in a long bar, bronze on bronze. Arya came around the corner of the nurse's station, dark hair in its low bun, blue scrubs, the small silver wings pin, worn soft at the edges, on her lapel. She walked toward him, and she did not hurry, and the cold of the floor came up through her soles, and she noticed it, as she always did, and she did not mind. Brago turned his head and looked at her. She looked back. Then she opened the door to room 14, and he walked in at her left side, steady and warm and wholly present, and the door swung closed behind them, and the corridor was quiet, and the light held everything it found. That story is one of our favorites to carry. The ones where someone did the work without signing their name, and the work found a way to speak anyway. If you haven't already, we'd love to have you stay. Each story here is chosen for the people who believe that quiet courage is real and worth honoring. And we'd love to hear from you. Was there ever a moment when someone finally saw what you had been doing all along? When the work was recognized after you'd stopped hoping it would be? Share it in the comments. We'll be there.